Before we begin this podcast, if you or someone you know is in crisis or needs emotional support, there are tools that can help. You can call Talk Suicide Canada at 1-833-456-4566, or you can text 45645. Coming in the fall of 2023 in Canada, you can also call 988, just 3 numbers. You can also call the Kids Help Phone at 1-800-668-6868. And the Trans Lifeline in Canada is 1-877-330-6366. In the United States, 1-877-565-8860, or call 911. You are not alone, and you do not need to be alone. Welcome to the We Are the ADHD Family Podcast. This podcast is meant to chronicle our family's journey with ADHD, autism, and other discoveries along the way. I reach out to advocates, experts, individuals, and other families that want to raise their voices and empower those on their journey. My name is Mark Smeets, and I am passionate about removing barriers for others through creating connections, building on strengths, and practical problem solving. I am married to Siobhan, a father to 2 wonderful kids, and all of us have ADHD. We want you to feel like you have power and hope. I would like to honor and recognize the traditional and unceded territories of the Katzie, Kwantlen, and Semiahmoo nations, on whose territories I live, work, and play. Welcome to the next episode. This one will be a tiny bit different. I want to give an update on the last podcast episode that I posted about last week. As you may be aware, if you've listened to the update that's called Sunnyhill, we'd waited many years for this appointment, and we finally got it. Tuesday, April 11th was our appointment at BC Children's, and I'm not going to hold you in suspense or anything like that, but our son officially is diagnosed with autism. And to be quite honest, we could not be happier. We are excited. It has been a long time coming. And that's just how we feel. As you can imagine, there's a lot of relief on our end, and it was an emotional, it was very emotional for us the entire day, and even the entire 2 weeks leading up to it. So I want to get into that story in a little bit, and I want to tell you and take you along on the journey and sort of what happened. There's a couple other things on my mind that I want to get down. So let's do a big macro view of the rest of the episode. First thing I'll go into is just where my headspace is at. Second thing is going to be how we explain things to Owen and what the day was about. Third, I'm actually debating renaming the podcast. And number 4, I'm debating a pause. And I decided at the last minute to do a 5th, which I wanted to give you some insight into the process of how we prepared all our information for Tuesday. I guess the first thing I want to touch on is where I am headspace-wise, and where my wife and I are headspace-wise. It's Tuesday morning. It's officially been a week. At this time last week, I was racing towards BC Children's in Vancouver traffic in the pouring rain. But now that it's been a week and there's been some time to absorb things, smile still comes across my face and it still feels good. Yesterday was interesting because I couldn't understand why I was feeling deflated. And I'm not sure if that's the right word. I figured it out over the course of a conversation last night and waking up this morning. And what I realized is that the long fight is over. The fight that we dragged on for 5 years and waited for that moment is done. And I guess that's the weird thing to get used to. It's no longer having to... It's the adjustment. You're going for that fight. You know, that fight that you sort of would have relied on for so long and said to so many people, just to say, hey, listen to our story. Let this be a warning sign for you. If you have to go down that path, and it's that thing you've been telling yourself, convincing yourself for so long of. And now you don't have to do that anymore. And it wasn't till I realized, again, not until I woke up this morning, I realized that it made sense. And that sort of deflated feeling has gone away. I know there's going to be other things to go on with next and other things to fight for and so forth. But at least I can say for certain that that one fight is done and you can sort of leave it behind or leave it behind you. Let's get into Owen. Before I get into the autism explanation, let's set this up for you, the listener. Owen was the first one of us to get diagnosed, and Owen has come to grips, I think, really well with ADHD. When I had my initial diagnosis, I told him about it, and we shared that together. So he got to see me go through things. I think that was a really cool experience. When my wife got her diagnosis, now Owen has yet another person to relate to. And when you ask Owen, I mean, he'll just tell you exactly what I say, which is, it's his superpower, which I think is perfect. Now, for me, I will look at my ADHD as a superpower when I'm medicated, because if I'm not medicated, the chances of it doing of my superpower going awry is very high. But that's ADHD for you. And Owen's accepted that. Owen has also accepted his dyslexia, and we don't have an official diagnosis of dyslexia, but everything that we've seen and experienced with him and teaching, when I sit down with him to do math, he tells me exactly that the numbers are flipping on him. Subtraction seems to be a particular sticking point for him too. After talking with the school, with our observations, their observations are the same, and I'm just going to cut out the middleman and just be like, dyslexia, period. Where it goes to dyscalculia, I don't quite know sort of yet. The dyslexia piece is very unknown to me right now. But as far as his dyslexia goes, he's frustrated with it and he hates it. There was one time I was helping him with some math homework, and he just cried because he couldn't stand it. I actually ended up doing some really fun things with him to get him over that little hump. When it came to explaining autism, I wanted to have that conversation a long time ago, and we did. My wife and I did try. I think the way we went about the conversation was rather clumsy because we didn't even know how to explain it. This time, I wanted it to be a different conversation, and instead of saying, you're autistic, I wanted to tie everything together. The week before the appointment, we wanted to give him a heads up that we're going to go down to Children's because he needs to know and wants to know, if we're going to go do something, he wants us to, he wants to know where we're going to go. He doesn't like unknown things, far from it. And so also car rides make his tummy upset. The way I explained the autism side to Owen was that I told him, son, Mom and Dad have basically been wondering if there's more to your story, if there's more to you. I said, we don't know what your umbrella looks like. And he goes, what do you mean? And I said, well, you have your ADHD, he acknowledges, and there's another thing called autism. That's got a few other traits that we're trying to understand about you. So we don't know what your umbrella looks like. And he goes, okay. So you can imagine like that quick one-word response from a kid, and you're like, all right, I think he's good with it. I'm not sure. Anyways, so throughout the week, we reinforced the point to both our daughter and our son that we're going to find out what color Owen's umbrella is. That seemed to be quite a positive reinforcement. One other thing that I wanted to stress to Owen was that I didn't want him to think that if he uses the phrase, I have autism, I don't want it to sound like it's a cold or a flu, right? No one's going to catch autism. No one's going to catch ADHD. And that is something I wanted to explain to him, to where I used ADHD as the example, and I said, look, I know I say, we have ADHD, but I don't mean it like we caught a cold or what have you. We are ADHD. And when I explained autism, I used the exact same analogy. So it's not I have autism, I have ADHD, I am these things, which I think is important to establish now. This is going to be for the rest of your life, the rest of my life, your life if you're listening and you have any of these. My wife and I go to pick up the kids from school and we're walking back. And I asked Owen, did you tell anybody that you have autism? And he stopped me dead to rights and said, Dad, I do not have autism. I am autisma. And it wasn't the first time that he said he had autisma, but I didn't want to correct him because it was just like, damn straight, you caught your dad saying it wrong, asking you the wrong way, and you put your foot down right away. Like, good on you. And they earned the McDonald's that night, that's for sure. But I laugh at the autisma thing every single time. I can't help it. But what's important is that it becomes part of his identity. And he can't shy away from it. There will be aspects that he hates of it. But there are going to be aspects that he absolutely loves. I've seen that growing up, with him growing up. 9 years old so far. Now that we have our autism diagnosis, I began to wonder if I should rename the show. However, I've got no idea what I would rename it to anyways. And when I think about it, it all started with ADHD. That was our gateway. That was our start. And when I wrote the show opening, I purposely mentioned autism because we didn't know at the time, but I told myself, you know what? Just assume that is the case. I think I made the right call. The other thing too is that it's an easy and snappy show title to remember. There is a stigma that I want to see smashed with ADHD. Whether it's, they're just hyper, or they're just a space case, or that you can't be successful or accomplish goals because you've got ADHD. Nothing could be further from the truth. And these are the stigmas and myths that hold a lot of people back. What we need are the tools and strategies to accomplish those goals and a fair playing field, much like anybody else would want. So I want to make sure that we draw attention to this. When you think about ADHD, you have so many things that can co-occur with it. You could be ADHD and have OCD, ADHD and autism, or autism and ADHD, whatever order you're going to go, whichever I guess is more pronounced. You could have, I'm not sure if you can have ADHD and PDA. PDA is pathological demand avoidance. ADHD and dyslexia, ADHD and whatever. The amount of things that coexist with ADHD is shocking. And part of the problem is that everybody, I think a lot of society sits there and thinks, it's autism and such and such. No, it's not. It's not just about autism or Down syndrome. ADHD has co-occurring things with it as well, whether it's anxiety, depression, dyslexia, and so forth. I don't want to take away the focus of what ADHD is about and just how important that is. That's probably why I'm going to leave the show name the way that it is right now, and it's the only thing that makes sense. Let's talk about a break. We've got this brand new diagnosis, and there is a lot to learn. There's understanding how the funding system works, paperwork that needs to be filled out. We need to put together our own team as well. Not to mention identifying, his goals. This is a lot. And last week, it was interesting because I took a day to go clean up my emails because they were just a mess. And as I was trying to organize a lot of the stuff from Sunnyhill, I was actually getting overwhelmed because, number one, I had way too many emails. But number two, I realized I had to make an entirely new folder system. You just don't grasp how big the task is because you don't know. I'm wondering if it may just be time to settle in for a little bit. For the sake of my own sanity, pause things, see if I can find a creative way just to keep the episodes flowing. I don't want to take a break from this, far from it. I do want to keep going, but I know I need to give myself that adjustment period. If there's not an episode or two for a little bit, don't fret. I'm not closing shop. Far, far from it. There's too many people that need help, and I'm not willing to go quiet. I guess that's where I stand with that. Break, but no break. How are you supposed to prepare for something like this? Let me bring you on the process that my wife and I came up with. We had about 2.5 weeks to prepare, give or take. The hardest part was trying to figure out how to take all of our information and put it in a concise and easy to present format. We had emails to daycare and school stating that Owen had a rough morning, he may struggle. We had videos and photos of things that went on throughout his life, clear-cut examples. We also had to learn about the DSM. The DSM, for anybody that doesn't know, is the diagnostic manual where they put things like the requirements for autism or ADHD, etc. And it's all broken down in those sections. So the easiest thing that I could think of to do was to print out as many emails as I could, organize them and catalog them, and then capture the contents. That was hard, and I realized it wasn't working. So I did what I do best, which was I started a spreadsheet. Now, word of caution is I'm quite advanced in making spreadsheets. I hate calling myself an expert, and I hate experts who call themselves experts. It drives me crazy. But if anything that I'm about to describe sounds way out there, I'm happy to explain it to you and take it from there. I was also talking to a friend who gave me a great piece of advice. Thank you, Denise. She said to me to list everything in chronological order. That way you can show progress. I just went through the emails, photos, videos, and stories that we had. I put them all into the spreadsheet. The spreadsheet is divided into 6 sections, from left to right, from columns A all the way to column P. I hope you've got a pen and paper to write this down. Here are the 6 sections that I had. I had age, status, classification and type, diagnosis, description, and a section to tally everything up. In the age column, my first 3 columns was the date of birth, the starting year, and the age. The starting year and the age were all formulas. In the status, the next set of columns, I basically said, how long did this continue? Until what age did this specific thing continue? If it was hand flapping, how long did we see it go till? The location / where we saw it or where it would typically happen. Under classification and type, there was a category. So for example, if it was a milestone, like a life event, say, Mackenzie being born, I would put that in there as a specific date. Or started at a new daycare. That would be a specific date. The next column under that was the documentation. And this was important because I basically broke it down in terms of anecdotes, email, photo, video. Under the diagnosis tab, or diagnosis columns, you had a primary, secondary, a third, and a fourth. And all this information was one large drop down. I had made a separate tab. The tab had 152 different possibilities that came from the DSM and a few other sources. If I thought something might have been, I don't know, he goes up and hugs everybody, okay, that's, and there's no barrier, that could be an abnormal social approach. And that's what you would go find on your drop down. And if you weren't sure what it actually was, then you could go to or you think it might be more than one, it fits in more than one category, then go to your second, third, and fourth. Each section also corresponded, of that 152, also corresponded to a specific reference in the DSM. So I think it's A1, A2, A3, A4, and then it goes B1, B2, B3. So for example, abnormal social approach, that corresponds to A1. Language and development delay is B4. In the next section, the description section, basically, this is a description of what we saw, or questions that we had. Maybe there was something odd that he was doing, and that's what we would note down. That really was the important part because we wanted to be as detailed as we could with that, and we could always elaborate on those things. Section 6, that is the section that I tallied everything up. So I took the categories of your primary, secondary, third, and fourth, tallied all those results up, onto another tab and combined everything together in the correct DSM order. The great part was, because we tallied everything up, my wife and I could see all the DSM reasons and how they broke down. Did we have more information in one area than another? Do we feel that an area is lacking, yet we completely forgot about a specific example that we could have used? That's what tallying everything up did for us. It was great. And even if we weren't sure we had the correct diagnoses, we could always put a second or, third, fourth column, whatever. Once we had everything put in, I sorted all the rows by the year and by the primary diagnosis. And it was really cool because you could see the progression of his life. And we realized, of what was happening at birth, year 1, year 2, year 3, year 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and just seeing where things have sort of changed. And then you're going, oh my God, you remember all these challenges that you had. And it was a very cool moment for us to sit there and see that. I had received another piece of advice, again, credit to Denise on this. Some doctors may take offense, if you're thinking about doing this, some doctors may take offense to a parent doing their quote-unquote job, or at least trying to convince them of the parent's opinion of a diagnosis, right? We're not the experts, unless you happen to be, but typically we are not. I mean, we may know a lot, but we're not the experts. I essentially took the sheet and I made a new tab, removed all the diagnoses portions, and I just left the age, the status, the classifications, and the descriptions, and that's what I sent off to Sunnyhill. By the time we were done, I shouldn't say by the time we were done, by the time we had ran out of time, because it was Monday night, basically we had 300 rows of examples in the spreadsheets. Siobhan had written 14 pages in a Word document with either expanded explanations or things that we just missed and we couldn't put in. I found a 56-page journal that had chronicled like a few months worth of our lives. And I think it was like from 2017 to 2018. There was 24 gigabytes of videos and photos that were organized and labeled, and 2 large binders of information and reports throughout Owen's life. One thing I want to mention is that I did keep the original spreadsheet on my laptop. I wanted Sunnyhill to have their own version and for me to have mine. That way, when I went to go reference something, I knew what I was referencing and why. We weren't just prepared. We were prepared for a war. If we didn't get a diagnosis, we wanted to walk away with at least some sort of explanation. I guess the funny thing is that there was still more information that I wanted to elaborate on, like food. What's the difference between autism, or rather, where's the line between autism, ADHD, and ARFID? And if you don't know what ARFID is, it stands for Avoidance / Restrictive Food Intake Disorder. There really wasn't time to put 9 years worth of information into a spreadsheet, not in 2.5 weeks. When our appointment at Sunnyhill started, the doctor said, "Someone did an excellent job putting all this information. I've never seen anything so well done." My wife pointed at me, and I raised my hand and said that I had put it all together. It was a very, very funny moment. He had thought a staff member did it. Interesting side note, the doctor said to us that he knew we were serious about this because of 2 things. Rarely does the husband and wife ever attend together. It's almost always the wife. And the sheer amount of organization and the information was enough to tell him that this was a serious matter for us. But that is the insight into what it took to get ready for Tuesday. Now, one more side note, I had also developed some sort of shoulder impingement, and that made working extremely painful, since I couldn't really raise my arm at all. I had a very, very limited range of motion, and my hand just sort of kept going half numb, half not numb, because I knew the nerve was getting squished in my shoulder. So when we went to the appointment Tuesday morning, I could barely reach the steering wheel in the car, but come hell or high water, we were not going to miss the appointment, and we weren't going to reschedule either. At one point, Siobhan did joke to me that I should go get an x-ray in the ER. because, as we were waiting, because you have to do the child interview first and then the parents are next, I was just wincing in pain throughout the entire time that we were talking to the doctor, and it was nothing but adrenaline and nerves carrying me around. The doctor even said, I'd offer you something, but all we have are child-sized versions of the medicine that you probably do need. So I did get an x-ray the next day. Anyways, that's it for now. I am going to get our story written and recorded soon. It's about time you heard exactly what happened. Be safe, and don't forget to like and subscribe. If you want to be a guest on the podcast or know someone who would make a great guest, my contact information is in the show notes. This podcast is open to everyone. You don't need to be an expert, just passionate and want to see change.
We are the ADHD family.
If you like what you hear on this podcast, please give the show a rating so it makes it easier for people to find us. How many hours do you think it would take you to realize that you left the ice cream on top of the refrigerator? Well, unfortunately for me, it was about 5. The opinions expressed by the hosts and guests are not associated with any employer or organization unless otherwise stated.